I think we've all had that feeling, right? When your car just decides it doesn't want to go anymore, you're just stuck.
Oh, yeah.
But what if it isn't like a busted part or anything, but the fuel itself is the problem? That's what's going on right now over in Essex at a BP petrol station.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, in Rayleigh. Apparently tons of cars have broken down after filling up there.
Contaminated fuel.
Yeah, that's what they're saying. And it's more than just an inconvenience. It could really damage engines. People are going to be stuck with some big repair bills.
Yeah, you're not kidding. That's a nightmare.
One expert even thinks it could be as many as 100 cars affected. Wild.
Really? Wow.
So how did this even come to light?
Well, a bunch of drivers, right, started having problems right after leaving this one BP station.
So they fill up, thinking they're good to go, and
then their cars start sputtering and stalling.
Oh, man.
Yeah, I read about this mechanic, Lee Pretlove, who owns a company called Fuel Out, I think.
Oh, yeah.
He's been totally slammed with calls, busiest he's been in years.
Poor guy.
He's been draining fuel and flushing systems nonstop. It's crazy.
So what's the actual problem with the fuel? Like, what's in it?
Looks like the main culprit is water.
Water.
Water contamination in the petrol. You'd think it'd be obvious, but even a little bit of water can mess up your engine.
I mean, you'd think water in your tank would be instant game over, but is it really that bad?
It's pretty serious. For your engine to work, you need the right mix of air and fuel. That creates the combustion, the explosion that gets your car moving.
Right.
But when you add water to the mix, it messes with the whole process. Misfires, stalling, you name it. It could even damage parts like your spark plugs and fuel injectors.
So it's not just about a rough ride. It can lead to, like, lasting damage.
Exactly. Worst case, it could even wreck your catalytic converter, and those are expensive to replace.
Yikes.
It's like chucking sand into a well-oiled machine. Throws everything off.
And of course, that means the drivers are going to have to pay up for all this.
Right, yeah.
Huge repair bills because of bad gas.
Yep. And it really makes you wonder about the whole system.
Totally. Like, who's responsible when this happens? How do they even make sure the fuel is good in the first place?
So many questions.
Okay, but what if someone listening thinks they might have gotten some bad fuel? What should they do?
First off, don't panic. But don't just ignore it either. If your car starts acting weird after you fill up, sputtering, stalling, anything like that, pull over as soon as you can, and don't try to restart the engine.
Okay.
The more you run it on bad fuel, the more damage you could do.
So you pull over, and then what? Call for a tow.
Pretty much. Call a breakdown service, or if you know a specialist like Lee Pretlove's company, give them a shout.
Makes sense.
They have the right tools to drain the fuel and clean your system. Trying to do it yourself could just make things worse.
Yeah, I bet it's way more complicated than just siphoning gas out like you see in the movie.
Oh yeah, way more to it. You got to make sure you get all the bad fuel out and everything's clean.
Yeah.
Not a DIY job at all.
So what can you do to avoid getting in this mess in the first place? Like, any tips for choosing a gas station?
Picking the right station does matter, yeah. Look for places with a high turnover, meaning they sell a lot of fuel.
So busier stations are better. Why is that?
It's about freshness. Busier stations are constantly getting fresh fuel, so there's less chance of water or anything else settling at the bottom of the tank.
So, like, if you're choosing a restaurant, busy usually means the food's fresher.
Exactly.
Good analogy. So busy stations, good. Anything else?
Yeah, be mindful of when you fill up.
Okay.
Try not to go right after a fuel delivery.
Why is that?
There's a chance all the sediment at the bottom of the station's tank gets stirred up during delivery, and then that ends up in your tank.
I never thought of that. So wait a bit
Yeah.
after you see the tankers.
Exactly. It's a small thing, but it could save you big time. And, of course, always look around the station. Any spills, messed up pumps, anything that looks off, trust your gut and go somewhere else.
A little observation goes a long way. So going back to the BP situation, it sounds like they're taking this pretty seriously, right?
Oh, for sure. They've shut down the bad tank, and they're asking anyone who filled up there recently to get in touch with them.
Smart move.
Definitely in their best interest to figure out what happened and make sure it doesn't happen again.
It feels like this could be bigger than just one bad batch of fuel,
Yeah, you're right. This might be a local thing, but it makes you think about fuel quality everywhere. Could happen anywhere, really.
It's a real wake-up call. Makes you appreciate just how important it is to be aware and take care of your car.
Absolutely.
This is definitely making me rethink my next fill-up. We'll keep talking about this after a quick break, looking more into the risks and what we can do to stay safe.
This whole thing in Rayleigh got me thinking about something people ask me all the time.
Oh, yeah. What's that?
Like, how often does fuel contamination actually happen? Is this like A freak thing or what?
Yeah, that's a good question. Should we all be freaking out, or is this a one-off?
Well, I mean, contamination on this scale, it's not super common,
Right?
but it's not unheard of either. Think about it. Fuel goes through a lot to get from the refinery to your car.
True.
There are so many places where something could go wrong. A leaky pipe, a bad seal, even just condensation in a storage tank.
Oh, wow.
Any of that can contaminate the fuel.
So many ways to mess it up. So besides water, what else can get in there?
You could get rust, dirt, sometimes even bacteria, especially in older tanks.
Gross.
And then there's the issue of additives getting mixed up.
Oh, right.
That can change the fuel and cause problems too.
Like a recipe gone wrong.
Exactly. Except instead of a bad cake, your car just stops working.
So what can gas stations do to, prevent all this?
Well, regular inspections are key. Got to be checking for leaks, corrosion, any signs of water getting in.
Makes sense.
And they got to be careful when the fuel gets delivered. Make sure everything's clean and sealed up tight.
So it's all about maintenance, basically. Stay on top of things.
Yep, pretty much.
Okay, let's talk about something you mentioned earlier, people putting the wrong fuel in their car.
Oh, yeah.
The RAC says like 150,000 drivers in the UK do that every year. That's crazy. Why do you think that happens so much?
I think a lot of it is distraction. People are busy. They're on their phones thinking about a million things.
Right.
They just aren't paying attention at the pump.
It's like autopilot,
Yeah, you do it so often you stop thinking about it. Plus, sometimes people are driving a car they don't normally drive.
Oh, yeah, like a rental.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And they just forget what kind of fuel it takes. Or the labels at the pump confuse them.
I've been there. Is there anything they could do to the pumps to make it easier?
Some places use different colored nozzles for petrol and diesel.
Oh, that's smart.
Helps avoid mix-ups. And some newer cars have these things that stop you from putting in the wrong fuel.
Really?
Yeah, like a flap in the fuel neck that only opens for the right nozzle.
That's cool.
But not all cars have that yet.
So until then, what can drivers do to avoid this mistake?
It's got to be present, Actually pay attention when you're filling up.
Right.
Take a second to check the label, even if you think you know which fuel it is.
Good point.
And if you're driving a car you're not used to, definitely double check.
Makes sense.
It's also good to always use the same side of the pump for your car. Makes it a routine.
Oh, yeah. That's a good tip.
Less chance of grabbing the wrong nozzle.
So mindfulness is key. Bringing it back to Rayleigh, what's the big takeaway here for our listeners?
I think it just shows how important it is to know your stuff.
Yeah.
Be aware of the risks with fuel, whether it's contamination or putting in the wrong kind.
Right.
Know the signs of trouble and know what to do if something seems off.
Don't be afraid to ask questions.
Exactly. At the gas station, your mechanic, wherever.
Knowledge is power.
Definitely. Can save you a lot of hassle and money in the long run.
This whole deep dive has been a real eye-opener for me.
Yeah, me too. It's a good reminder that even something simple, like filling up your car, can have all these consequences you don't expect.
Speaking of consequences, let's talk about the people in Rayleigh. What kind of impact is this having on them? I can't imagine how frustrating this whole thing must be for those drivers.
Oh, totally. Their cars are messed up, they've got these repair bills, and who knows how long it'll take to get it all sorted out.
Yeah, talk about a disruption. Some people are probably looking at some serious bills they weren't planning for.
Exactly. And some might not even have a car to drive now.
Right, like what if that's their only way to get to work or take care of their family?
It throws your whole life off.
It makes you think, like, what can they actually do? Can they hold BP responsible for this?
That's where it gets tricky.
How so?
They'd have to prove that the fuel is what caused the damage.
Oh, so it's not enough to just show they filled up at that BP?
Not really.
Yeah.
They'd need, reports from their mechanic, repair bills, maybe even get an expert to back them up.
So they basically have to build a case. What about BP? Are they doing anything to help?
They've said they're investigating and told people to contact them. It's definitely in their best interest to handle this well. They'll probably end up covering repairs for people who can prove the fuel caused the damage.
Seems like a lot of hassle for everyone.
Yeah, for sure.
Is there anything drivers can do to protect themselves in these situations? Besides, being careful about where they fill up?
Definitely. Keep all your fuel receipts.
Good point.
That proves you bought the fuel there, which is important if you need to make a claim.
Right.
And if your car starts acting up after you fill up, document everything.
What do you mean?
Take pictures, videos, write down exactly what happened.
Okay.
That'll help you remember. And if you have to prove it was the fuel, you've got evidence.
So basically, document.
Exactly.
It seems like being informed and staying ahead of things is so important.
Absolutely.
This whole deep dive has really made me think. Any last thoughts for our listeners?
I guess just remember, this stuff can happen, even though it's not that common. Fuel contamination is a real thing.
Yeah.
If you know the risks, take precautions, and know what to do if something's wrong, you're way better off.
Well said. It shows you how even something as simple as filling up your car can have these crazy consequences.
Oh, sure.
Well, thanks for joining us for this deep dive into contaminated fuel. Hopefully everyone learns something and feels a bit more prepared. Until next time, stay safe out there.